Hello, and welcome to the Lorbatory, the place where myths, legends, and stories come to life. Together, we'll dive into the depths of the most fascinating lore from games, movies, history, and beyond. So grab your magnifying glass because we're about to dive into the full lore and background of all the characters in Visage and unravel the tragic tale that connects them all. Visage is a psychological horror game by Sad Square Studio that draws inspiration from real world events, blending them with supernatural elements. But what really sets Visage apart isn't just its terrifying atmosphere, it has deeply intertwined complex backstories and psychological terror, largely focused on grief, loss, and the horrors of the human mind. The game's events are tied to psychological horror, and the house itself acts as a reflection of the torment the characters endure. Each chapter shows a different aspect of mental anguish, grief, guilt, fear, and the inability to escape one's past. These emotional states are mirrored by the supernatural manifestations in the house. The house isn't just haunted, it serves as a physical manifestation of the characters' collective traumas. The story takes place from 1961 to 1985. Dwayne Anderson is the main protagonist and suffers from a mental illness, as seen by the pills scattered around the house and the main stress mechanic in game. Notably, pill bottles are prescribed in Dwayne's name and are labeled chlorpromazine, commonly used to treat schizophrenia and manic depression. In the game and in the opening scene, we see him holding a gun with his family tied to 3 chairs. Shortly after, we see him shoot them one by one, and then eventually, he shoots himself, which is reiterated in the beginning of the game on the radio.
On another note, today we got a special guest with us, and we're going to have a lot of fun with him. His name is Dwayne Anderson. His whole family.
To alleviate any confusion, you are playing as Dwayne's ghost. After committing this horrible act, you awake in the same room he killed his family. It seems as if Dwayne is in purgatory, and the gap between life and death, while also being haunted by apparitions of the house's previous victim. This also explains why all the clocks in the house are stuck at 3:33 a.m. and cannot move forward. The hours of 3 a.m. to 4 a.m. is also known as the witching hour, where paranormal events are more likely to occur. But to get into this story, we need to start with the first chapter. The first chapter, called Lucy's chapter, Lucy lived in a house with her parents in 1961. She loved to draw, play with her toys, and hide in her treehouse. One day, a demon began to talk to Lucy through her TV and radio set. Lucy was very scared at first, but the demon said it only wanted to be friends with her. After a while, the demon ordered her to kill her pet bird Pico. Possessed by the demon, she bit off Pico's head. When confronted by her parents, she blamed the demon for her bird's death. Horrified at what she did to Pico, her parents reluctantly turned to medical treatments. Lucy was administered syringes, and even though her mother didn't approve, they ultimately only caused pain and worsened her mental state. Her parents became distraught as Lucy's condition worsened. They became even more worried, especially after Lucy stopped referring to her mother as Mom. One day, Lucy locked herself in the bathroom. Mentally disturbed and tormented by the demon, she ripped off her own jaw and died from blood loss, despite the anguished cries from her parents just outside the bathroom door. Chapter 2. Dolores' chapter. Dolores was the wife of a man named George, and they were raising the baby together as well. She enjoyed listening and dancing to opera music, as well as drinking tea. When she and her husband moved to their new house, the Visage house, she became mentally ill with signs of dementia, bipolar disorder, anxiety, and violent paranoia. George tries to take care of Dolores as well as the baby at the same time, which wears on his own nerves. His knowledge of mental health conditions did not help him in curing her. Dolores started spying on her husband, as her paranoia gave her the belief that he's up to something. In the deepest moments of her bouts of dementia and paranoia, she claims George wants to poison her with rat poison. What justifies her delusions is seeing George put medicine in her tea. Remember, George is trying to take care of Dolores all on his own without any idea of how to properly take care of someone with a mental illness, as he tries to cure her with medication. What's also very interesting is in the moment you see George bring the tea to Dolores, you see If you zoom in and pause the video, you can see that it's actually called Killer. It looks like it's actually rat poison. Is George actually trying to kill Dolores, or is this what you're seeing from her perspective, that it is rat poison, when in fact it is just tea? Her episodes include mumbling random numbers, which you can see scattered all across the inside of the house, on the walls, on the papers, etc.
Doctors tell me it's become very hard to pinpoint the exact disorder. They tell me she's got symptoms of schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, psychosis, dementia, and more. I don't know what to do anymore. It feels like the treatments are only making things worse. Today she told me she often hears her own voice whispering a sequence of 5 numbers through the baby monitor. She said it's the key to her inner house. What does that even mean?
Scratching her arms, banging her head on the walls, and extreme emotional outbursts that had no trigger. There are a few times that she calms down and demands George to forgive her actions, showing she was aware of his attempts to be patient with her. When George started to become very overwhelmed and nervous about Dolores' increasingly violent responses, he decides that better care was needed. He even mentions on a tape how he is afraid to leave her alone with the baby. Dolores responds to this decision by killing her own husband, stabbing him 7 times with 7 knives in cold blood. Dolores enters her bedroom to comfort the baby after committing this murder, and the sight of her baby reduces the violent response. With her moment of clarity and an overwhelming sense of grief, Dolores takes her own life by hanging herself. The baby is left to cry in fear from the sight of Dolores hanging his corpse, and subsequently perishes from neglect with both parents now dead. Chapter 3, Rakan's Chapter. Rakan was a former rugby player who was put into injury reserves following an injury. He moved into the home in the year 1970, and shortly after became very paranoid, thinking he was being watched. He kept finding little objects around the house, assuming they were technology used to spy on him. Rose, his neighbor, called the police shortly after witnessing tossed books all over the floor and screamed. He was administered to a local hospital, becoming very hostile towards the doctors and care workers. He insisted that there was a break-in and that he shot a gun in self-defense. However, the police found no evidence of a break-in ever happening, implying it was a paranoid delusion. Rakan then becomes hostile, so hostile that they put the hospital in something called a code white. A code white signifies a violent or aggressive situation involving a patient, a visitor, or staff member, which requires immediate assistance and coordination to ensure safety. Shortly after this, Rakan attempts to escape by jumping out of a nearby window. He breaks both of his legs in this escape attempt. This is shown later in the game as he begins to use crutches. After this, there is a recording of a female voice relighting Rakan's state, acknowledging that he will be staying for a while because his mental state has worsened. It is revealed that Rakan believes he is being bugged by an evil corporation who wants to brainwash him into submission. He thinks he has avoided this due to his mental capacity and overall awareness. Shortly after this, we watch Rakan be interrogated. The interrogator is telling Rakan that because of his behavior, he will now need to be isolated from everyone else in the psychiatric ward. The interrogator mentions treatments, which makes Rakan flip the table and demand he receives no treatments. He is seen again in a room where he is now in a wheelchair. He sits in silence as he is evaluated and told that because of his improved behavior over the past few months, he is ready to go home. He is last seen standing in a room. Now, whether this be the underground of the psychiatric ward or maybe he is back in the home, we do not know. But he's talking to himself about how he knows enough to take them down. He laughs, but he notices a mysterious figure standing in the doorway. Rakan asks who sent him, and the man slowly closes the door, making Rakan get on his stomach and crawl towards it. The screen fades to black, Rakan's scream of agony being heard until the lights are turned back on. The final chapter, Dwayne's chapter. Dwayne's backstory is fragmented, and it's up to you, the player, to piece together the details of his downfall. This chapter is progressed through 7 videotapes you find throughout the house, and a few through the first 3 chapters. We learn that Dwayne worked for a company producing illegal psychedelic drugs, based on the real-life story called Project MKUltra. Project MKUltra was a human experimentation program designed and undertaken by the CIA to develop procedures and identify drugs that could be used during interrogations to weaken individuals and force confessions through brainwashing and psychological torture. Another sub-project of MKUltra was Operation Midnight Climax, a research program that began in the 1950s, which gave researchers permission to test drugs on unknowing citizens, which made way for the legacy of this operation. Hundreds of federal agents, field operatives, and scientists worked on these programs before they were shut down in the 1960s. This will be important later. Dwayne was a chemist producing LSD for a company named Health Pharmacy in 1953. This company, however, was bogus and was only used to carry out research on patients from the 1950s to the 1960s. Dwayne has connections to all the victims in this house, starting with Lucy getting injections before her death in 1961. This is confirmed in many dialogues we hear from her parents in Chapter 1. Dolores was evaluated for her mental disorders in 1962. Now, it isn't confirmed of any drugs or prescriptions given to her, but I honestly believe she was giving something for her illness, which would explain her changing behavior throughout her chapter. We also know Rakan was admitted into a mental facility, which I believe both Lucy and Dolores visited there for their illnesses. After being prescribed this experimental drug, their conditions got worse, which eventually led to 2 of them ending their own lives. Now, someone I have not mentioned yet was a man named Lewis Taylor, who is another apparition which haunts and tries to kill Dwayne throughout the game. Lewis Taylor was a doctor, and in my opinion, unaware of Project MKUltra, and eventually found out Dwayne's secret. With no other option, Dwayne pushes Lewis into a well, leading him to drown. In one of the tapes in Dwayne's chapter, we see him visit a well, and this, in my opinion, confirms my suspicions. Lastly, Rakan. We are led to believe he has a mental illness called obsessive gaze. But what makes this interesting is we watch Rakan's chapter through a camera lens, and even in this chapter we see him find a monitoring device in the bookshelf. Now, remember Operation Midnight Climax. I honestly believe he was being watched and drugged by the sub-project of MKUltra, secretly, to monitor his behavior. Rakan lived alone, and this was the perfect person to run this test on. As the chapter progresses, we see his decline into madness. Now, currently, we don't know where Dwayne is working or what he is doing at the end of Rakan's chapter. But what we do see is a man in a suit close the door on Rakan wearing a mask. I believe this is Dwayne once again covering up a loose end for the CIA. Throughout this chapter, we start to understand the downfall of Dwayne. He harbors massive guilt for the part he took in these experiments, the lives he's ruined, and the fear of being killed or maybe vanishing if he ever told anyone what he's done with his involvement with Project MKUltra. With all the guilt and depression, he becomes an alcoholic. I do believe this is a coping mechanism. This, however, doesn't work as he starts to spiral. He eventually kills his entire family, and then himself. Somehow this all comes full circle, and in his chapter we see his guilt manifested in delusions, giving specifics on how all the previous people died in this house. Now, this could be just his guilt, or it could be the apparitions torturing him. Finally, the chapter has multiple endings. In the default ending, Dwayne wears a mask, and it is day. He enters a room behind a haphazardly painted wall and teleports to a white screen with his family in the distance. In the alternate ending, named The Void, Dwayne enters the room, opening a secret door and going down a staircase. He reaches the room in the game's opening with a revolver. Dwayne shoots himself like he did in the opening. In a flash, he sees the location of one of the 7 VHS tapes needed to collect to achieve this default ending. After collecting one, time repeats itself 6 times. At last, the revolver is empty. Dwayne wakes up in the well in Chapter 4, endless in all directions. Does this mean he will never have closure? Is he stuck in this hell forever? I suppose we'll never know. Like I mentioned before, the story is based on real-life events. And one I haven't mentioned was Lucy's chapter. Lucy's chapter is based off of a person called Annalise, which was also used to make the first Exorcist movie. Now, it's loosely based on that, so I wouldn't get too wrapped up in it. But with that, that's it for Visage. Make sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss on our next journey into the unknown.